Sylvester Stallone built his career playing men who take beatings and refuse to go down. His real life has followed that same pattern, except the punches came from places no script could prepare him for. From a birth that left his face permanently damaged, to burying his own son, to nearly losing his family more than once, the man behind Rocky Balboa has absorbed hit after hit for 78 years. So let's get into the life of Sylvester Stallone and trace how the tragedies stacked up. On July 13, 2012, Sage Moonblood Stallone was found dead at his home in Studio City, Los Angeles. He was 36 years old. His father, Sylvester Stallone, had just been at Comic-Con the day before, promoting The Expendables 2 alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger. According to reports, Sage had not been heard from for 4 days prior to his death. Just a phone call that would shatter one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. Sylvester Stallone released a statement that read, in part, "When a parent loses a child, there is no greater pain." He went on, "Sage was our first child in the center of our universe, and I am humbly begging for all to have my son's memory and soul left in peace." That statement, measured, grief-stricken, almost pleading, came from a man who had spent decades turning personal suffering into entertainment. But this was not entertainment. This was the kind of loss that no amount of Rocky sequels or Rambo reboots could rewrite. And the thing is, Sage's death was not the beginning of Stallone's tragedies. It was in many ways the culmination of a lifetime defined by them. To understand how deep the pain goes, you have to go back to the start. Not to the glittering premieres or the Philadelphia Museum steps, but to a charity ward in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan, where a baby came into the world already damaged. Sylvester Gardanzio Stallone was born in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood of New York City on July 6, 1946, to Jackie Stallone, a celebrity astrologer and wrestling promoter, and Frank Stallone Sr., a hairdresser and Italian immigrant. His mother went into labor while riding a city bus. A stranger on the bus helped her off and carried her into a charity ward. And in that ward, under the hands of overworked doctors, something went wrong. Complications during Stallone's birth forced his mother's obstetricians to use 2 pairs of forceps while delivering him, accidentally severing a nerve in the process. This caused paralysis of the lower left side of his face, including parts of his lip, tongue, and chin, which gave him his signature snarling look and slurred speech. From the moment Sylvester Stallone entered the world, his face told a story of something gone wrong. The left side of his mouth drooped, his speech came out heavy and garbled, and in the neighborhoods where he grew up, that was all the ammunition other kids needed. He was bullied in his childhood, with which he coped by getting into bodybuilding and acting. Before the fame, before the fortune, before his films grossed $7.5 billion worldwide, before he became one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood, he was a kid who couldn't speak clearly, whose own reflection felt like a stranger's, and who came home every day to a house that offered no refuge. Because the Stallone household was not a safe place, not by a long shot. His father, Frank Stallone Sr., was a man of violent temper. In the Netflix documentary Sly, Stallone reflected on what it was like growing up under that roof. "I was raised by a very physical father. I was no stranger to serious pain." His brother Frank Jr. confirmed it, adding that their mother was no gentler, recalling her use of hairbrushes and shower brushes as instruments of discipline. One specific incident captures the dynamic. Stallone recalled playing polo when his father began screaming at him from the stands about his technique. One day, while Stallone was playing polo, his father began screaming that he was riding the horse wrong. And finally, Stallone pulled the horse up, and his father came out of the stands, grabbed him by the throat, and threw him to the ground. The man who would one day play boxing champions and one-man armies spent his childhood learning what it meant to take a hit from someone who was supposed to protect him. His parents had a volatile relationship and fought all the time. They eventually got divorced. The toxicity of the marriage became so overwhelming that both Sylvester and his younger brother, Frank, were placed into foster care. Because of their troubled marriage, Sylvester Stallone went from one foster home to another until age 5. Both his mother and father worked hard at the time, so much so that they went more than a year without seeing their children. A baby born with a mangled face bounced between foster homes before kindergarten, raised by parents who used their fists more than their words. That was the beginning of Sylvester Stallone's life, and it only got harder from there. After his parents split, Stallone stayed with his father in Washington, D.C. until he was 15 years old, then moved in with his remarried mother in Philadelphia. He spent most of his teenage years in Philadelphia, a city he came to love so much that it later became known for the Rocky movies. But loving a city did not translate into thriving in it. Not for a teenager carrying the weight Stallone carried. His facial paralysis made him a target everywhere he went. He told the Chicago Tribune that growing up, his nerve damage made him feel like Mr. Potato Head with all the parts in the wrong place, adding that he wanted to be anyone but himself. He also developed rickets as a child, suffered from attention deficit disorder, and found academic settings virtually impossible to navigate. By the time Stallone was 12 years old, he'd been kicked out of 13 schools and broken 11 bones. He described the sort of destructive behavior that filled his days: swatting flies off cars with a lead pipe, painting a house black, firing arrows from classroom windows, jumping off roofs. These were not the acts of a born troublemaker. They were the acts of a child, desperate for attention from a world that seemed determined to reject him. And yet, there was something inside Stallone that kept him going. Even though his childhood was full of strife, Sylvester Stallone believes that the parental neglect he experienced gave him a desire for validation from an audience which kept him motivated to push on. That emotional void, the black hole left by absent and abusive parents, became the engine that would eventually propel him toward Hollywood. He attended the American College of Switzerland, then the University of Miami, eventually obtaining a BA degree. When he moved to New York in 1969 to pursue acting, the struggle only intensified. Stallone found gradual work in films such as The Lords of Flatbush in 1974, but before that there were years of nothing. Empty rooms, rejection letters, casting calls that led nowhere. Stallone reached rock bottom in those years. He was so desperate for money that he took a role in a low-budget erotic film called The Party at Kitty and Studs. He later told Playboy in a 1978 interview, "I was starving when I did it. I'd been bounced out of my apartment and had spent 4 nights in a row at the Port Authority bus terminal trying to avoid the cops. He was sleeping in a bus station, hiding from police, keeping his pens and books in a 25-cent locker. He said that finding out he could make $100 a day, even if it required removing his clothes, felt extraordinary. That is the depth of poverty and humiliation that Sylvester Stallone lived through before anyone in Hollywood knew his name. And there was one more loss during these bleak years that cut in a way only an animal lover can understand. Stallone had a bull mastiff named Butkus, a massive, loyal companion, who stayed with him through the worst of the worst. Butkus slept beside him in the flophouse above the subway stop. With no steady income and hardly enough money for food, he made a gut-wrenching decision: selling Butkus for $40 outside a 7-Eleven. He described it as one of the hardest moments of his life. But Stallone never forgot his best friend when he finally, against all odds, sold the screenplay for Rocky. The very first thing he did was track down the man who had Butkus. He later wrote on Instagram, "When things got even worse, I had to sell him for $40 in front of a 7-Eleven store because I couldn't afford food. Then, like a modern-day miracle, the screenplay for Rocky sold and I could buy him back. But the new owner knew I was desperate and charged me $15,000. Stallone paid every cent without blinking. The dog went on to appear in the first 2 Rocky films, playing himself, essentially, as the loyal companion to the underdog boxer. That image, a broke, beaten-down Stallone standing outside a convenience store, tying a handwritten sign to his beloved dog because he cannot afford to feed him, is the image that defines who this man was before the world knew his name. Not a movie star, not an icon, just a man who had lost everything, including the one creature on earth that loved him unconditionally. And then came the script that changed everything: a match between Muhammad Ali and a relatively obscure boxer named Chuck Wepner. Inspired Stallone to pen the script for Rocky. Wepner was a journeyman, a nobody in the boxing world, who somehow managed to stay standing against the greatest heavyweight champion of his era. Stallone saw his own story in that fight, the story of a man with no pedigree and no connections refusing to quit when the bell kept ringing. He sat down and wrote the screenplay. Although producers originally wanted someone well-known to play the title character, Stallone refused to sell the story unless he could star as the underdog boxer Rocky Balboa. Producers dangled enormous sums of money for the script alone, reportedly up to $360,000. But Stallone, who was functionally homeless and broke, turned them all down. Despite major studios offering to buy his script, Stallone refused to sell unless he played the lead. Hollywood hesitated, but eventually United Artists gave him a shot. Released in 1976, Rocky became an Oscar-winning sensation, taking home Best Picture and launching Stallone into superstardom. For the first installment in the series, Stallone received Academy Award nominations for his acting and screenplay. At 30 years old, the kid from the charity ward in Hell's Kitchen was suddenly the biggest name in Hollywood. But stardom exacted a price that Stallone did not fully recognize until decades later. His first marriage to Sasha Chesak had begun in 1974, and they had 2 sons together, Sage, born in 1976, the same year Rocky was released, and Sergio, born in 1979. At the age of 3, Sergio was diagnosed with autism. His parents have since dedicated themselves to raising awareness and funding for the disorder. The autism diagnosis was a devastating blow. In the early 1980s, understanding of the disorder was primitive compared to today, and resources were scarce. Stallone was heartbroken at what he felt was an inability to connect with his younger son. He admitted, "There is no real father and son thing there. I have to become his playmate. With a child like this, you have to put away your ego." The then-estranged couple told People in 1985 that they dealt separately with their son's struggles, with Shaq shouldering most of the responsibilities for the boy while Sly worked. And work he did. Stallone threw himself into his career with a ferocity that left little room for anything else. He directed, wrote, and starred in sequel after sequel. He introduced another iconic character, John Rambo, in First Blood in 1982, with hits like Rambo, First Blood Part 2, Cobra, and Cliffhanger. Stallone became one of Hollywood's highest-paid action stars. His body became a fortress of muscle. His name became synonymous with the action genre. But his family was paying for that obsession, and the cracks were spreading. His marriage to Sasha Chesak ended in 1985. In 1985, Stallone married his Rocky IV co-star Brigitte Nielsen. They split in 1987 after 19 months. The whirlwind romance with Nielsen was loud, public, and spectacularly short-lived. 2 marriages down before he turned 41. Then came Jennifer Flavin. In 1988, Flavin met Sylvester Stallone in California at a Beverly Hills restaurant. They were in a relationship until 1994, when Stallone wrote her a letter saying that he was having an affair with model Janice Dickinson, and that he was the father of her infant daughter. However, after DNA tests had shown that he was not the father, the relationship ended. Flavin reconciled with Stallone in 1995. They were married on May 17, 1997. Together they had 3 daughters, Sophia, Sistine, and Scarlett. The marriage lasted, but the pattern that destroyed his first family, work above everything, career above connection, persisted. He said it himself in a 2022 interview. "I used to have my priorities all screwed up. You know, work came first." That admission would not come cheaply. It would take a catastrophe to force Stallone's eyes open. In the years between Rocky's release and the turn of the century, Stallone's eldest son, Sage, had been quietly building his own path in the film industry. He co-founded Grindhouse Releasing, a company dedicated to preserving cult and exploitation films. He also co-starred with his father in the 1996 action flick Daylight, but behind the camera was where he found his groove. But Sage's relationship with his father was complicated, strained by the same workaholism that had fractured the family years before. In the Netflix documentary Sly, Stallone acknowledged that the storyline of Rocky V, in which Rocky neglects his son for boxing glory, was drawn directly from his own failures as a father. "You put things before your family," he admitted, "and the repercussions are quite radical and devastating." The film's director John Hertzfeld said that Stallone cast Sage in the movie to help him break into acting. He wanted to give him this opportunity that was so hard for Sly to get. The irony was cruel. Stallone played a father learning to reconnect with his son on screen. In real life, the reconnection never fully happened. Sylvester Stallone suffered a devastating loss in 2012 when his son, Sage Stallone, died at the age of 36. The Rocky actor's late child was found dead in his Studio City, Los Angeles, home, and reports surfaced that he hadn't spoken to anyone in the days leading up to his untimely death. An autopsy by the Los Angeles coroner and toxicology tests determined that Stallone died of coronary artery disease caused by atherosclerosis, with no drugs detected other than hydrocodone, which had been prescribed after a dental procedure. According to the coroner, Sage was a heavy smoker, and the habit likely helped contribute to his death. as smoking is one of the chief causes of heart disease. Weeks before he died, the mother of Sage Stallone begged him not to undergo extensive dental surgery. Sasha Chek told the New York Post that her 36-year-old son was on pain pills at the time of his death after having had 5 teeth pulled. The extractions took place 2 weeks before he was found dead. At the time of his death, Sage was reportedly engaged. He was 36 years old, young, planning a future, ready to start a new chapter, and then he was gone. The tabloids immediately swarmed. At the time, reports emerged that he had died of an overdose after authorities found bottles of prescription pills in his house. Stallone was forced to beg publicly for the media to stop speculating. Sylvester Stallone released a statement calling for an end to the speculation and questionable reporting about his son's death. "When a parent loses a child, there is no greater pain," he said. Sage's funeral was held on July 21st at St. Martin of Tours Catholic Church in Los Angeles. The private memorial included the elder Stallone, wife Jennifer Flavin, and brother Frank Stallone. What followed Sage's death was a period of reckoning for Stallone. He had spent the better part of 3 decades choosing movie sets over dinner tables, choosing franchise deals over father-son conversations. The Expendables actor's documentary briefly touches on Sage's death, revealing how the trauma of that loss had an impact on Sylvester. There is a moment in Sly where the documentary shows archive clips from Rocky V. Rocky embracing his son, telling him he matters. Watching that footage now, knowing that the real son who stood in that scene is dead, transforms a simple movie clip into something unbearable. Stallone did not discuss Sage's death in detail in the documentary. He couldn't. Some wounds don't convert into words, not even for a man who has made a living putting pain onto paper, and yet the grief did not end there. In 2020, his mother, Jackie Stallone, passed away at the age of 98. His father, Frank Stallone Sr., had died in 2011, just a year before Sage. Within the span of roughly a decade, Stallone lost his father, his firstborn son, and his mother. By the time 2022 arrived, Sylvester Stallone seemed to have found a measure of peace. He was starring in Tulsa King, a Paramount series created by Taylor Sheridan and Terrence Winter, and he had his family around him. Stallone and Flavin had celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in May 2022. He posted photos on Instagram, writing that there weren't enough words to describe what his wife meant to him. 3 months later, everything fell apart again. Flavin filed for divorce from Stallone after 25 years of marriage at a court in Palm Beach County, Florida, on August 19, 2022. In the filing, she accused Stallone of hiding marital assets, stating that he had engaged in the intentional dissipation, depletion, and/or waste of marital assets. The breakup was made even more public and more painful by a tattoo. Stallone had a portrait of Flavin on his bicep, but recently got it covered by an image of his late dog and Rocky co-star Butkus. His publicist claimed it was a botched touch-up. The internet was not convinced. It was a stunning moment. 25 years of marriage, 3 daughters, a public love story that had survived infidelity rumors, career ups and downs, and the grief of losing a child. And it was seemingly over in the span of a news cycle. But then something unexpected happened. In late September 2022, they called off the divorce proceedings, filing an order of abatement after reconciling. Stallone later told the Sunday Times about the near collapse of his marriage. "It was a very tumultuous time. There was a reawakening of what was more valuable than anything, which is my love for my family." He admitted what he'd known for years, but never fully acted on. "I didn't pay enough attention when they were growing up. I was so career-oriented." It took the threat of losing everything again for Stallone to finally shift his priorities. He told Entertainment Tonight, "I used to have my priorities all screwed up. You know, work came first. And eventually, I came out of that delusional thinking, and they come first." So, you're right. To actually have them here, that's what it's all about. Today, at 78, Stallone is still working. A second season of Tulsa King premiered on September 15, 2024, with a third season set to premiere in 2026. In May 2023, he and his immediate family, wife and 3 daughters, starred in a reality TV series called The Family Stallone. He received a Kennedy Center Honor announcement in 2025. Films in which he has appeared have grossed over $7.5 billion worldwide. Stallone is one of only 2 actors in history, alongside Harrison Ford, to have starred in a box office #1 film across 6 consecutive decades. The numbers are staggering. the legacy is cemented. But when you strip all of that away, the box office grosses, the award nominations, the iconic film characters, what remains is the story of a man who arrived in this world already broken. A man who was beaten by his parents, mocked by his peers, abandoned to foster care. So poor he slept in bus stations and sold his only companion for pocket change. A man who turned all of that suffering into the greatest underdog story Hollywood has ever told, and then watched as real life dealt him blows that no screenplay could soften. Sage is still gone. Sergio still lives outside the spotlight, navigating a world that wasn't built for him. The forceps scars still mark Stallone's face every time he looks in the mirror, and the years he lost with his children, consumed by the machinery of fame, cannot be recovered. Stallone rediscovered his childhood faith when his daughter was born ill in 1996. He later said he spent much of his time in Hollywood losing his way, but eventually tried to put things in God's hands. Whether or not faith provides the answers he's looking for, the search itself tells you something. A man who has fought his way through 78 years of pain is still looking for something beyond himself to hold on to. The tragedy of Sylvester Stallone is not that bad things happened to him. Bad things happen to everyone. The tragedy is that he spent so long turning pain into art that he sometimes forgot to turn it into presents. Presents for his sons, for his wives, for himself. He said it best on the set of Rocky Balboa. The film required him to talk about pain and endurance, but off-camera, standing in sneakers that were broken from the abuse of filming, Stallone delivered a message that may have been meant for himself more than anyone else. Keep moving forward. That's all he's ever done. That's all he knows how to do. And at 78, with the weight of everything he's lost pressing down on him, the fact that he's still standing is either the most inspiring or the most heartbreaking thing about his entire story. Maybe it's both.